All right, we'll go ahead and get started this morning. First, I'd like to say that this meeting was properly noticed by having the agendas placed on the board's website on Thursday, October 3rd, 2013. The board has a new member, Dr. Charlene Spiceland. She is taking Stan's place, and Charlene, if you could, just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Charlene Spiceland. I teach at the University of Memphis, accounting, and but prior to going back into teaching, I worked in corporate accounting for about
Glad to have you. Did you get the chance to meet everybody yesterday? Is there anybody here you didn't meet?
I met them all.
Okay, good deal. All right, just a quick reminder that the board will convene again on Tuesday, November 5th, to hear the case of Mr. Edwin Osborne that was remanded to the board by the Chancery Court. So this is a case we previously heard. It was appealed, and then it has been remanded back, so we will have a formal hearing. I believe that's it. Is that at 1 o'clock?
1:30.
1:30. 1:30 in the afternoon. Staff is asking that...
Mr. Chairman, I'm
yes.
sorry. Just a brief point of clarification. Unless something really strange happens with the administrative law judge, this will not be a full formal hearing as you're typically used to. It'll be almost solely for the purpose of reconsidering the discipline in light of the Chancellor's ruling on appeal. So it won't have to start from scratch and redo all the proof and everything like that.
Okay.
It's, so we're hoping, fingers crossed, it shouldn't take that long.
Good deal. Thank you.
We'll have information ahead of time about the appeal.
I am working with Mark. We're going to figure out a way to get all of you the administrative record, which will include the exhibits, so that you can all look at that ahead of time individually on your own, so that you don't have to sit here and try and read through probably a couple hundred pages of documents the day of.
One 1:30. I wonder if that's an Eastern time.
1:30 here would be 2:30.
I hope not.
Thanks, Henry. Thanks for clearing that up, Henry.
All right. Just a note from staff that when you're speaking, please speak clearly and speak into the mic so everything can be recorded properly. So make every attempt to be heard. Are there any other announcements? Anything else y'all need to? Hearing nothing. You should have the minutes from the meeting on July 19th. If you would review those, and I'll accept a motion to accept those minutes.
So moved.
I have a motion, I have a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The minutes are approved. Mark, we'll move right into the Executive Director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In addition to what I have written and what you've already perused, I would like to add I've received notification that NASBA, the AICPA, and Prometric have decided to extend the fourth quarter testing window on the CPA exam to December the 6th. It would normally end November 30th. But they're extending it because of the late Thanksgiving holiday. It is the last Thursday in November. It effectively would close the testing centers as of November 27th. So they're extending that window 1 week for candidates testing in the fourth quarter. The targeted score release date for candidates who take the exam between December the 1st and December the 6th will be December the 20th. So trying to get scores out 2 weeks after the close of the window. I would also like to point out to you that you have in front of you, everybody should have one of these little booklets. This is a product of the State Board Committee. This is something we've been working on, and hopefully we'll have additions available soon to pass out to students when we go out to speak, so that they have a clear pathway on how to become a CPA and what the CPA exam is all about. And last but not least, let me give you an update on our CPE audits. We conducted 488 audits. Of those 488, 435 were compliant. 30 were not compliant and will require late penalties. 20 were removed due to a status change or a recent reinstatement. And we've opened 2 complaints so far on the CPE audits because we've gotten no response. So that's where we stand, and I think unless you have questions about anything I've said or about my report, then we can move into the NASBA report.
Office.
You note here that you've been appointed to the chair of the Executive Directors Committee of NASBA for the next fiscal year. Congratulations regarding that recognition. Based upon the schedule you provided, at least me, it appears that just the meeting days will require over 7 weeks of you being out of town. It's
believe that's
37 days.
Yes, sir, I believe
And
that's
that
right.
doesn't include preparation, and it doesn't include any travel time. And we've already moved a couple of board dates to accommodate your NASBA schedule. And I just would want to make sure, and with an affirmation from you, that your job as Executive Director of the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy is your #1 priority and not the NASBA assignment.
Yes, Mr. Blofeld, my job here is my #1 priority. You have my affirmation on that.
Because you're out 7 weeks for this, plus other travel, plus vacation. And the question is, when you're gone, who is in charge?
You were provided a list of board staff with your board packet this time,
At my request.
at your request, Mr. Blofeld. And Ms. Turner is the one who's in charge of personnel matters while I'm out. Any technical questions will be referred to one of the investigators if
Has
I'm
the
not
board
available.
ever met Pat Turner?
Yes, sir, Ms. Turner's been in here, it's been several years, but we can certainly arrange to have her come in January.
I think it'd be good to perhaps to be better acquainted with some or all of the staff.
Certainly, we can arrange that.
Testing window was extended to December the what?
December the 6th.
6th, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Other questions? All right, we'll move on into the NASBA presentation.
Now, NASBA is going to be presenting this on the boards. You all may, if you can see this one, that's fine. You may want to move out to the audience area so you can see the board up here. It is on your iPads if you want to follow it that way. It is up to you. And with that, I will introduce Rebecca Gephardt. Rebecca?
Yes. Thank you. You're going to need me to speak into the microphone as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Please.
All right. Well, my name is Rebecca Gephardt. Good morning, everyone, and thank you all so much for inviting us to present to you today. Represent NASBA, and so therefore, of course, I represent you all. And I am the manager of compliance services at NASBA. So my area, we try to offer lots of different tools and services to help with things that are really after licensure. Continuing education, different forms of enforcement tools, and also just resources to help with like peer review committees and that sort of thing. So really happy to be here today to share with you all some ideas and some concepts that we've been working on for a little while at NASBA, trying to see what kind of new things we can roll out to our boards to assist you all in your efforts. And so Mark was kind enough we already met with Mark preliminary and Ms. Condon over there and showed them some. They liked what they saw, and so then Mark said, well, you know what, let's have you come over and show everything to the board. So we're glad to be here. So I'm here to talk to you today about CPE audits and a new pilot CPE audit service program that NASBA has put together and that we've been trying out with a couple of states. And as you all know, NASBA, we exist to help support our boards in your efforts and everything you do. And so it's our job to just listen, pay attention to what's going on, and respond to the needs and requests of our boards. And one of the things that, we've been hearing over the past several years, especially as budgets have been, more limited, that CPE audits are an area that are troublesome, problematic, cumbersome, time intensive, all of those things. They're just, but also very necessary as well, because they're very important to protection of the public. So just because when things get slimmer, we have to work smarter, not harder. So we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We want to help you all find a way to continue, or not just you all, but all of our boards. Our goal is to help our boards find a way to continue to offer a high standard of CPE audit and do as many audits as possible, but do it with less resources as needed. And so, as we were evaluating, what can we do at NASBA to help our boards with accomplishing the CPE audits in a more efficient way, we realized that we actually had a couple of tools or platforms that were existing at NASBA that we felt like we could sort of integrate and offer a platform at very little expense to NASBA that we could pretty easily roll out to our state boards in fairly short order. And so last year in 2012, myself and Maria Caldwell, some of you may know, she's our general counsel at NASBA. We went down, we got invited to go to the Missouri Board of Accountancy meeting in August of 2012 and did a presentation very much like this, although things have evolved a little bit since then. But we did a presentation like this to the Missouri Board and proposed to them that they be the pilot state to try out this new method or platform to help them manage their CPE audits. They were excited about it, and they very graciously agreed to pilot that program with us. So that meeting was in August last year, and then by November, we had kicked off their fall audits using this system. So, and what you see on the screen there, or on your iPads, is the homepage of the website where the CPE audits take place, and where the Missouri CPAs would log in to turn in all of their CPE information if they were selected for audit. So that went really great, and so we decided, that pilot program went really well, and we decided we wanted to try to get some other states on board, and let's see if we can duplicate this pretty easily with other states. And so just to give you an idea of how this works is we basically have taken the Accountancy licensee database and another tool called CPE tracking, that both of those already existed at NASBA, and we decided we could just integrate those two and do a little configuring to offer a really great solution for boards to manage their CPE audits. Now, for those of you that may not be as familiar with the Accountancy licensee database, that is the national database of CPAs that NASBA's been working on for about 8 years. We're up to 44 states that are sending in data feeds of all of their licensee data. Most states send it in on a daily basis. Tennessee is one of those that we receive a daily feed straight out of the e-licensing system with the board that comes in and helps populate that database. It's an amazingly powerful tool for boards of accountancy, for enforcement, and especially with cross-border practice. The Accountancy licensee database is only open to authorized board staff and EDs because there's a lot of confidential information in there. And then some of you may have heard we do have a public-facing version of that has a much more limited data set, and it's called cpaverify.org. If you haven't been there and looked at it, you might want to check that out and go look yourself up and see how it looks. So the ALD, so we were already getting a daily feed for many boards with the full licensee data set. And so we thought, well, that helps us to be very streamlined with an audit tool. And so we also had this existing CPE tracking tool, which is a software solution that weighs the CPE credits that have been earned against the state board's rules for all the different specific state-specific rules, and it calculates compliance. Now, it's an automated calculation, so it simply is doing math based off of rules and data that's been entered, but it's really sophisticated, and we think we've done a great job with getting all of the rules coded in there for all the states. So those two things we decided to combine together, and because we can feed, we can feed these data records that come in from the ALD over into the CPE tracking tool to automatically set up user accounts for the CPAs that might need to submit for an audit. And what's really great is every time a new, because comes in every day and we get an updated feed every day, every time a new licensee is issued a new license, well, the next day when that feed comes in, we know about that person, and it automatically sets up a fresh new account in the audit website as well. So we want as little human interaction as possible, because that's what's going to help make us efficient. So it's been working really great. So here you can just see a little bit of a kind of a visual to explain what I just talked about, where we have the ALD data. It comes in through a very secure system, and then goes into the ALD system, and then helps to populate all of the user accounts and information that are housed in the CPE audit program. So what does this look like? If you all would like, we'll just spend a little time. Are we doing okay on time so far? Okay. I did go ahead and include pretty extensive screen captures, because I wanted you all to have these as a takeaway, so you could see. All of you could interact with this at some point, and I would want you all to see what the licensees would experience when they're using the platform, and then also what board staff would experience. So I have included some screen captures, and we'll kind of maybe see if we can go through some of these to give you an idea of what the user experience would be like. So as I had shown earlier in the earlier slide, every board that would participate in the CPE audit service would be given their own dedicated website. We call that an installation. That would be branded for your board. As you can see, let me go back. As you can see here, we did for Missouri. So you would have something very similar to this. Their website address was mo.cpetracking.com. So if Tennessee were to participate, it would be tn.cpetracking.com. So we try to make it pretty simple. And the Missouri board included links to this site, to this login page and everything on their website. And we also offered some links from the NASBA website to this page as well. But this is where the CPAs log in, and also board staff. Everyone logs into the same place, but based on permission levels, different people would see different things. So this is what an individual CPA would see when they logged into their account. And all of this information that defines who that person is, all of this contact information, all of that is pre-populated and fed in from those ALD data feeds. They're everything that we need to know about them to help generate their reporting cycles in the system and understand when they report and if they qualify to even go in an audit or not. I know with Missouri, they wanted to make sure only people who had been licensed for at least the full length of that most recent reporting period would be even eligible to be selected in the audit pool, because they didn't want to be auditing partial reporting cycles. So that sort of information that is no problem because of all the information that we get in the ALD feed. And as you can see, that's what all of that is there. If anyone needs to update their records, they log in and they realize, oh, I got married and my name isn't current there, then they would not update those records with us. They would always update their records back at the state board, and then inherently, when that next feed comes in, it automatically updates in their account. And so There's just really, we tried to make it really simple. There's only really three main things that CPAs do in here. They can view this little dashboard page. They can go to the CPE credits reported tab and see all of the courses that they've entered so far. And then they can submit their records to the board if they're selected for audit. So it's really pretty simple. This picture here will give you an idea of what the CPE credits reported page looks like. And so this is just simply a laundry list of all of the credits that have been added to their account so far. And then if they want to add credits, there's two ways to get there. They can add new credit here through this link, or there's also some navigation up here under the Manage CPE Credits tab that allows them to go and add new credit. When they're adding new credits, they just step through a little wizard process. It's just a real basic, online form, basically. You can see the steps listed right over here, but these are important steps because we do have to have critical pieces of information about the course they attended so that we can know whether that credit qualifies or not. And so the first thing they do is they select the type of event or program. We call those program types. We have a lot of our own lingo, but the type of credit that they got. In this example I've set up here, it's and they attended an AICPA or state society program. So on the next screen, they just enter all the details about that course, the title, the date, who offered it, if it had a course number, that sort of thing. And then they would go on to select the subject areas that they got credit for and how many credits did they earn. All of this information really comes basically right off of their certificate of completion. And then last but not least, they upload an attachment. So this would be evidentiary documentation to show that they have attended this event. And this accepts all different file types, and it's just your typical browse and search mechanism. And then they can just review everything that they just entered, make any modifications if they see that they messed something up. Once they're satisfied that everything looks good, they just click Add, and then that record now officially appears on their CPE credits reported list. We have also want to point this out. There's Help tab at the top that offers, we've got a full-blown user manual to help explain to people how to use this. We also have videos because we know that nobody wants to read documents anymore. Everybody wants videos. So we also have help videos up there that step people through the process of how to enter their credits. And then finally, the Submit to Board feature. This is where they simply, if they've been selected for audit and they need to go ahead and submit their records, then they just go to the Submit to Board option. There's two ways to get to it as well. They can either click on this tab here, or they can go to this drop-down menu. And it just says, it gives them several pieces of information here. First, if they would like to use what we call a home state exemption, or if they would like for their credits to be weighed against their state where they do principal place of business, that is offered as an option to them, so they can use that, and they can indicate that here as part of the submit process. If they click yes right here, then a drop-down menu comes up to have them click the state where their principal place of business is located. And then ultimately, the system would then evaluate their credits against that state's rules as opposed to Tennessee's. And then also it gives them a flag here to help warn them, hey, you've got 3 events in your records that don't have attachments. So we've added that as well to help prevent people from accidentally leaving things out, because we know it's going to be very important they have attachments on everything. And then finally, we do offer the ability for them to export or print all of this information for their own records before they officially turn everything over to the board. And then once they do submit, the account actually is locked. And then they can be turned, once the audit is completed, their account can be turned back on later. But yes?
Any kind of import feature? I know we use some kind, I don't know what software it is that tracks our CPE and keeps up with it and makes sure we're compliant, and then all the certificates are scanned in. Is there an import feature from any of those kind of software providers?
We don't currently have an import feature yet, but I am going to talk about that as where we're headed, and in a few minutes. And so, because that's definitely the way we want to go, and is to try and get more more feed-oriented information. So it's not there yet, but I'm going to cover that in just a moment. And then the board staff, this is where the first screen of what a board staff user would see. Again, it's a basic dashboard with just some limited information about who's logged in. And as you can see, there's some new tabs that have been added now that this is what Karen would see when she logs in. That would be very different from an individual CPA. And that because this new tab has been added called Administration. And that's where all of the board staff's work would be done, is under that tab. So as you can see, there's managed users and managed groups. The managed users goes to the full laundry list of all licensee accounts. So you could search and locate the record you're trying to look for. The managed groups actually has them grouped into audit pools per year. So if you needed to isolate and you only want to work within the 2012 audit pool, then you can just find that sectioned out. That also helps us, having them flagged like that into groups, it helps us for audit pool selection in the future too. So if you don't want people to accidentally be selected in consecutive audits, then we can purposefully leave out, the last group from even being possible candidates for the next audit. So you just find the record you want to look at. We set up an example here. This is Tennessee CPA, and click View Details to then go in and see the user's information. As you can see here, there are several more tabs available to the board staff user. There's this compliance tab, login history, and audit log. And the board staff person conducting an audit would want to go to the compliance status tab. And this is that automated compliance report I was talking about earlier that just gives an immediate idea of whether they even earned enough credits or not. And it has everything summarized in a box here where you can see the number of credits required per reporting period. You can toggle up here in this right corner from one reporting cycle to the next. And then the number earned, and then the number short. So immediately, without having to do any math, your staff person would know immediately if they even look like they're going to be compliant or not. And then as you can see right up here, this is actually an overall audit status for the whole reporting cycle. And so if a board staff person got ready to work on an audit for this account, they could mark this as in progress to help them know which audit is in the works. Then if you click into the Events tab, this is a breakdown of all the courses that were taken. This is really basically another way of looking at that CPE credits reported tab, but it's got a few extra columns. As you can see, the very far left column has, it says audited, ? And that gives an ability to see at a glance which courses the staff person has looked at yet or not. We have added this little green light, red light, yellow light feature. So if it's blank in that column, that record hasn't been looked at yet. It's not audited. If it's green, it's passed. It's already been reviewed and determined it's acceptable. If it's red, for some reason, it was not acceptable, and so it was failed. And then we also offered a couple others, yellow for in progress and blue for if there's something that you want to review it with the board to see if the board wants to make a decision on it. And so, well, let me see. So the board staff person could just click on the course number to go into the details of that event, and they can look over the information that was entered by the CPA, and then go over to the Attachments tab to download and look at that documentation that was provided. As you know, a lot of these would be certificates of completion, and all of that information can be reviewed against the details that were entered by the CPA to determine if it's acceptable credit. And then once the determination has been made, then this right here in the details, back to the details box, is where the staff person can mark if the status that they determined on the course, whether it was not audited, audited, passed, failed, you can see those options here. Let's assume it was a good credit and we marked it as passed. Then, as you can see now, that course is now showing in the events list with a green light because it's been reviewed and it's passed. I really liked this part because then actually if you wanted to do an audit of your audit, it's really easy to go in and look at a glance to see, look, every single one of these records had to be touched and looked at. So we know that the work was done. And then there's also reporting features that are offered under the Reports tab, where you can see aggregated information about the whole overall results of the whole program and your entire audit. This is a little screen that shows you some of the different reports that are available. The most commonly used report so far has been this audit details report, which really gives a full breakdown. It lists every single person who was included in the audit individually with an individual record, and then it shows what their compliance status is, which is that automated calculator that determines if they even earned enough credits or not. And it gives their overall audit status, so you can see how many have been approved so far, how many have been failed, how many are still in progress, how many are not audited yet. And then the quantity column tells how many individual records there are for each person, which I thought would be a great tool for helping people manage their workload. If you have 30 minutes left in the day, you probably don't want to look at somebody's record, start a brand new one that has 22. You might want to go, let me look at this person who has just one record. But that's a good way to help manage workloads and understand what you're getting ready to dive into. And then we've got how many of those records are passed, failed, in progress, not audited, or under board review, and then a last submission date. And then also, again, for board staff, we do have this help tab. So we have a full user manual for the board staff and lots of help videos for board staff as well. We've also put together a document that outlines a suggested workflow process that is that's not included in this help tab. Oh, yes, it is. It's actually in the appendix of the board staff user manual. So that is, basically it's a tool, it's a self-serve sort of platform that we're offering to state boards to help with the staff to just manage the whole process, the whole life cycle of a CPE audit. And I'll tell you this, Pamela Ives Hill, she was the executive director of the Missouri board at the time when we did the pilot last year. She has retired, lucky her. But she told us at the end of the pilot program that she cannot imagine ever conducting another audit ever again without a platform to manage the whole process, because it basically took all of these spreadsheets and checklists and folders and files, and it just put everything into a nice, tidy package that is, archivable and you can go back to. So she said that was her biggest takeaway, is it's really hard for her to imagine ever doing another audit without some kind of platform. And so to sweeten the deal, as we are hoping, back to your point, the ultimate goal is for us to move toward electronic attendance feeds into this program. So that way people don't have to manually enter these credits. And we know that's the wave of the future. We know that's what other professions are doing. I believe a lot of the Tennessee attorneys, that's the way their credits are handled. And so we know that people aren't going to be manually entering stuff forever. And the sooner we can get learning providers and state societies on board with submitting these records electronically, that is just going to make so wonderful for all the stakeholders. It's great for the CPAs. They don't have to spend that time. It's great for board staff, because if a record comes in automatically from the provider that offered it, you don't need to look at that manual. You don't need to look at that document.
Jennifer, is Missouri requiring all of their CPAs to do this?
That is a great question. They are not. The way they did it is they required their audit pool to do it. So they said, if you're selected for audit, this is where you have to go and submit your records. There were a handful of grumblers who, maybe just were not that tech savvy or just really didn't want to. So that was no problem. That was easily accommodated. For the handful of people that didn't want to submit electronically, they sent their package in as usual to the board, and the Missouri board staff entered their stuff on their behalf. And so because they still wanted to have it all together in one place. But what they did is they did their audit selection, and everybody who was selected for audit was required to submit through this way. Then later, Pamela, they got quite a few compliments and people asking from the audit pool, asking if they could use it more even when they're not being audited. And so Pamela asked us if we could open this up for the entire Missouri population. And so we thought about it and we said, sure, we don't see any reason why not. So in this past summer, around June, July, we actually opened this up to the entire Missouri population of CPAs, but it is optional. It's optional. It's there for them if they'd like to use it or not, but if they get selected for audit, then they have to do it. It's required. And what we were actually recommending for Tennessee is that you all start opening up to everyone from the get-go as an optional thing, if they want to use it, just a place to track their information. And then if they happen to get selected for audit, they're that much farther ahead than where they would have been because it's already in there if they're using it. But ultimately, we would love to work with the Tennessee Society to see if we could maybe do some piloting with them about trying to feed in electronic attendance records and maybe pre-populate as many accounts as possible so that ideally our goal is we would love to offer this to your board and your staff, and if you all think it's exciting and want to move forward, our goal would be to roll this out for your spring audits next year. And what we would love to do is work with the Tennessee Society between now and then to try and get electronic feeds going so that when we open it up to your licensees in the spring, people can log in and say, oh, look, all my Tennessee records are, my society records are already in there. So that would be, hopefully, help with the adoption rate because so much work would already be done. And so we actually met with Brad Floyd and Wendy and talked to them about this concept and this idea. They seemed like they were very interested, and so we just couldn't really take too many steps forward until we had a chance to see if this is something the board wants to move forward with or not. And then, as I was saying, electronic attendance records makes a process improvement for everyone. Boards of accountancy, they would definitely benefit from that, state societies, because that, anyone who's participating and sending electronic attendance feeds, I would think those would probably be more attractive sessions to take because they know their records are automatically going to be taken care of for them. And then the CPAs as well, it makes life easy for them too. And then this slide may scare you a little bit, but we actually, this is a big long-term vision, and we're just trying to start this slowly, and we thought it made so much sense with NASBA being right here in Nashville. Our staff, our technical staff, everyone. I have Amy Tongate here with me this morning, and she's a subject matter expert with the whole system. We have the society is right here in town, and then our Tennessee board. We just thought this made a great place for us to pilot all of this. Long term, what we'd love to see happen is we'd love to see lots of societies and learning providers get on board, submitting electronic attendance feeds, and we've actually already built this whole framework. We call it the global catalog. We're trying really hard to skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it is, and we've already built this whole framework. And we have this global catalog in place where if attendance records come in from the Tennessee State Society, they go into this catalog, and then they get distributed out to any state installation where that person has an account. So if someone has a license in Missouri and Tennessee, because of our linking capability we have with the ALD data, we know that's the same person from one state's website to another state's website. So those records would automatically be duplicated from one state site to the next. Same thing if someone manually enters their credit, it goes up into the global catalog. It would see, oh, that person's also licensed in Missouri, and it would put that manually entered record into their account in Missouri. So we have all of this already built in place. We're just looking for some takers, basically, who would like to get on board and move forward. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Cost is, right now you say there is no cost, I believe, in your presentation.
That is correct. Right now, we're trying really hard to make this available at no cost to our boards.
How long do you really think that that's going to last? Somebody's got to maintain it. There is a cost. And how do you ever go back if you're now linked to NASBA?
Right. Well, figuring out sources of revenue at NASBA is always a $1 million question. But we have some ideas about how maybe long term, because, there's some hardware expenses, servers and things involved. And now I will say it actually is pretty easily duplicated. We really did a great job when we configured this whole thing. When we were going to do this for Washington, and then they backed out at the last minute, not because they didn't like it, but because something else they had going on, and so they're going to revisit it next year. But we set up their whole entire website, their mapping of their data and everything, in about a week, maybe 2 weeks. So as long as we can continue to have that sort of track record where we're getting states up and running, and that in that sort of speed, then we keep our costs way down, and we can continue to offer it at no charge. Way down the road, if it, we've been kind of brainstorming about what are potential revenue sources down the road if if we do realize there's going to be some greater expense to this, maybe we need more technical staff or more hardware. And, we've talked about if one avenue would be if NASBA staff actually did some of the audits themselves, then we would maybe have to charge for that piece. Maybe we could extend our service a little bit and offer where we actually review the documentation and help with the audits, which requires more people, and then we might have to charge. And that would obviously only be available to a board that has the capacity to pay. And then also, there might come a time where we, with these electronic attendance feeds, perhaps we end up doing some sort of service fee for that would help to underwrite the ability to offer this to our boards.
So basically, in the future, you're looking to the Tennessee Society to pay a fee to give you their information.
That might be the case, yes. But that is pretty typical. It's our understanding that already happens for like the board, the law.
CLE? There's $1 per participant fee to the CLE.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, it's not something that we have to budget.
Gotcha. Yeah. Again, we may not go that direction. I don't want to startle anyone, but we are trying to think about ways that we could potentially try to, collect some kind of payment for it to keep it up and running.
Well, I would assume that if we did not make it mandatory for our members or the CPAs, they could still keep manual records and always have the option of not participating in that system.
That's very true. That's very true. I really feel pretty comfortable with it. I mean, I think that's a great question and concern, but, NASBA has to offer new things for our boards. That's important to our existence, is to make sure that we're relevant and offering and doing things for our boards. This is it's a good investment in ourselves to just be able to offer this to you all. We have our area that does the CPE audit service is also in the same department with the National Registry of CPE Sponsors, and so we sort of share budget there. And that's our model, is to take what revenues we do have in different streams and to pump those back into services for our boards. So we absolutely intend to continue trying to do that, as long as possible, and to make sure that ideally this is.
Who gets the phone calls when they're having trouble?
We offer full customer service support we would be happy to take any of the phone calls. Certainly if a CPA called our staff and asked a question about, something that was, whether the credit was going to be accepted or not, we would probably refer them to go ahead and contact the board. But we offer full technical support, all questions. Someone's having trouble logging in, someone having trouble navigating the site, or they forgot their password, they need assistance, we absolutely have staff available through regular business hours, Monday through Friday, to help take those calls. And we did sort of a customer service matrix with the Missouri board where we said, you know, if this issue comes up, who handles it, you or us, and so we would help organize that sort of effort with the Tennessee staff.
How do you go about educating the members about the program and how to use the program? Do you propose to do that through the board or through direct contact, or how would you do that?
Well, all we really did with Missouri is we drafted up the audit letter that went out to the Missouri licensees last year. And it was a little bit longer letter than in the past, but explained to them that they had been selected for audit and that the Missouri board was participating in a new program with NASBA where their records would need to be submitted through this new website. And it explained to them that they need to, here's the web address where you're going to go to comply with your audit. And you'll be logging in with your license number and your state issued PIN, that's the way we worked it out with Missouri. It might be slightly different with Tennessee, but it would be something like that. Probably be license number. So we gave them instructions in the audit letter on where to go, how to log in, and what to be prepared for. We included some information that said, you know, you're going to need to have all of your certificates of completion and everything in electronic format. So you might want to plan ahead and do some scanning or collect everything. So we just explained it in the audit letter, and then we did offer a page of information on the Missouri Board's website that kind of repeated all of that. We offer a page of information on the NASBA website, and I have to say we really didn't have very many questions. People seem to have very little trouble logging in, using the system.
You have any idea how many people were selected in that first?
Yeah, the Missouri pilot program last year had 254 people that were on. It's very similar to Tennessee. I think y'all are about 10,000 or so, and Missouri's about 10,000. And they do every other year renewals. So every other year they do audit 5% of half of their population. So that ended up with. So, and they'll be doing again this year another 5% for this fall.
I'm really asking about the people that aren't subject to audit, just the ones that want to use it voluntarily. How do you reach out to them?
Oh, gotcha. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
You're right. What we did is when we opened up the accounts this past summer to the whole Missouri population, Amy, do you recall, was it a mailed letter that they sent out? I think it was. I think they did a mailed letter announcing that to all of their licensees and just letting them know that it was now open and available to them to use. And we have been monitoring that very closely to see how many have logged in and started using it. I am happy to say we just pulled it fresh last week for Tom DeGroot. He's the new ED there in Missouri. And we had a little over 10% of the whole population has logged in and started using the accounts voluntarily.
Back to my question about where it ties into the proprietary software. I'm not an expert on this by any means, but it seems like what we use is it sends out notices to our staff that, hey, you have a CPU, so now it'll generate certificates, I think so, for like in-house CPEs that we issue.
Gotcha.
And then it keeps up the compliance for each state. It says, if I've got Tennessee, I'm good. I'm Mississippi, I'm good, or all that. And also other credentials as well, like CISA or any of that stuff. How would it communicate with that type of software?
I can't say that it would, because because you're talking about at your firm, right?
Right.
Because I think it would be really impossible for us to try and integrate with all the many different platforms that all the different firms are out there using, and that is where we would get into something that we wouldn't be able to fund it. The type of man hours and technology and people and involved in trying to integrate with all those different programs would make it impossible for us to offer it to our boards at no charge.
I guess my reason for asking is now do I have to enter this information twice? I've got to upload all the data twice and all the documentation twice?
Certainly wouldn't have to unless you got selected for audit. If you got selected for audit, then yes. But wouldn't you have to do that if you were selected for audit in the normal way right now? You have to compile all that information, or do you just do a printout?
You can just do an
You can
export
just do a
out
printout.
and submit
Gotcha.
it.
Well, I know the Missouri board would accept those sorts of things from firms that do have their own system. If I remember correctly, what they had them do is they would still have them. I think they would still have them enter a separate record for each class they took, but they didn't have to have like a separate certificate of completion for everything. They just said you can upload the one attachment and we'll see everything listed, but we do want to have a different record. And if Tennessee wanted to offer something different and accept it in one record, you know, that would certainly be a workaround that could be had. So that's a good point. And there were some concerns like that because I know a lot of firms have their own systems where they're tracking everything. So
I mean, this is a pretty large company. I don't know which one it is that we use, but I'm sure that several firms use this software. But I mean,
Sure.
to me, an attractive would be a start to finish program where I do the CP, it's uploaded, or it's automatically uploaded, and then it automatically, if I get audited, and then it electronically, is accessible, or it, communicates with the audit software, just to keeps my hands off of it.
I know that sounds awesome to me too.
Of course, if this is the direction the states are going, I would wager that those software companies are going to want to work out their own link because otherwise they'll be gone.
True. Free service, I mean.
Right. So I don't think that's going to, and I see a huge advantage in just the, particularly at the beginning rollouts, because those CPAs that start using it are not the ones you're probably going to need to target to audit anyway. So you're narrowing your pool down right away in terms of risk.
Yeah, and ultimately, if all the firms we'd love again to get the firms on board. Anybody that issues CPE credits, whether it's firms or societies or just regular like Western CPE companies like that. We'd love to get as many of them on as possible over the course of time, sending those electronic attendance records so that they would, if we could work with them, that is the way we integrate. I mean, that's the integration solution with all those different types of companies. We have one global catalog that we've already created that can accept all of those records. We just need for everybody to create exports out of their own tools using the template that we've come up with. And then if they could feed it, your firm could feed it straight over into this, it would go right into your account record. And we would love to work with you if you're put me in touch with your IT person.
That would be a great thing.
Because that's what we would love to do. Because we realize that's the way things happen is electronically. So
I'd like to kind of keep this going or moving on.
I
You have a question?
wanted to ask Karen a question, if you've had a chance to look at this. You see this as being a way of simplifying your audit process?
Yes, I think it would simplify it a lot because it would basically be organizing and storing the data for me. This past audit, we had 488 audits. That was almost 488 emails that I had and PDFs, a tracking sheet of my own, and I think this will make it a lot easier for me.
Wendy, I know you wanted to address the board on this topic. So.
Thank you, Chairman, for letting me make some comments. I'm Wendy Garvin with the TSCPA. And as Rebecca mentioned, we have met with the staff at NASBA. They have asked the Society to participate in the pilot program from the vendor side. We are still kind of wrestling with this. We are struggling with some questions from a short-term and long-term perspective. I would say to start off with, most vendors are going to have probably these same questions that we have. First is feeding over all of our data for our 300 plus courses, participant information. There's confidentiality associated with that, security. So, it's an understanding that, of course, there would be an agreement signed and that type of thing, but those are always things you have to take into consideration. Is that something that we have the right to do for our members, that the members want, that type of thing. So we're looking into that. Cost is another thing. For us, we're pretty big. We offer over 300 courses a year. However, most of our IT is outsourced. So for us to create the data feeds initially, implementation-wise, is going to cost us some money. So, once you get those set up, obviously it's a reoccurring thing that should not require too much support, but it's initial investment. When, on the other hand, we already have something we provide our members that allows them to track their CPE, and we could make very small improvements to that to not get all the way to the level of what this is, but that would be much more cost effective from our perspective. We already have a tracker which has all of our stuff, of course, and then members can log in and enter any other courses that they take. We could make some improvements to that. Like I said, that would be probably less costly to us. And from an ongoing perspective, I think it's already been addressed, what's the long-term cost or could be the cost. And, if it's going to be a cost to vendors, is that something that, is that a benefit to our members enough that we're going to pay to submit, to feed our data over? And along with cost is staff time. Like I said, we've got some IT staff, very limited knowledge, and then the outsource. So the time and resources it takes to do that, is interesting. And we've also thought about other vendors. There's firms out there. So what's the cost, and do you have the same concerns as you think about feeding that data over to NASBA on a regular basis? And if we're doing it for everybody, or are we just doing it for the audit pool? It makes more sense if you do it for everybody, but that's just a significant amount of consideration. And would it be tough on the firms who already have something in place? That's a consideration. So I think it's something that we'll probably need to get a more formal agreement and let our board take a look at, but I wanted to share some of the things that we've been struggling with in deciding whether this is something we want to move forward with.
Wendy, does the society have a problem with this being an alternative product available to our CPAs in the state? I mean, are you asking, or if I'm hearing you, I know the society has concerns, this is another option that could be out there for our CPAs, or is the society recommending that we not move forward with this at this time?
Certainly not in a mandatory perspective.
No, I understand, but I'm from your recommendation.
I think that obviously it's a platform that may help the staff, but from a requirement standpoint, we're not in favor of that because we haven't made a decision on whether, from the vendor side,
right,
that's something we want to move forward with.
Okay. All right, Mark, are we needing to have a discussion on this and figure out if we want to move forward with some type of pilot program with whatever limitations we set forth, or how do you want to move forward with this?
Well, I think we need to have a discussion on whether or not we want to move forward with it.
Okay.
Clearly, we're presenting it today because we will be using this in the spring audit should you approve it. And I'm bringing it to you all since all of you are audited. Wanted you to know what you might be getting into and want to know if this is something that you wish to pursue.
What is management's recommendation?
I see this as the wave of the future, Bill. I think it's going to come, whether we're part of the pilot program or part of a program years down the road. I think that this is what's going to be the accepted way to audit CPE in the future.
I feel like from a board perspective, I mean, it assists our staff in conducting these audits, and certainly down the road, if there's a cost factor, we may have to revisit it, but it just seems to me it's another tool that's out there, and nobody can force the society to submit electronic records, especially at a cost to them. I don't even know that that's what we're considering right now. I think we can put in whatever parameters we want to not require 100% of the people to go onto the system. One, I don't think we'd get major resistance to that, I think. But I look at it as more as just another tool out there to assist the CPA in keeping up with their records.
I think as the state enforcer, it's also important that this has the ability to keep those records forever. You know, we're eliminating the paper process, which is the way of the future. It makes it so that you could go back 5 years, 5 years from now, and look at that audit without any problem. It's just a much smarter way to go. And since we are the enforcers of the CPE, it seems like the society would want to assist that and move that direction also.
This decrease or increase staff time? I presume decrease.
It should decrease staff time, Bill. Of course, there's going to be an uptick in the learning curve that may take us a little while, but overall, it should greatly decrease the staff time.
Well, and it'll help us identify non-compliant individuals in the future and limit our pool of who we're selecting.
Right now, Mark, don't we do a random number generator that actually works now, and that's how we're selecting. We're not for audit. Now, people turn in their CPE at the end of the year, and that's reviewed for numeric. They certify that they have. When I go to renew, I say I have gotten my 80 hours, and then we select randomly. Is that still the correct?
We select randomly. We're not using a random number generator, but we do select randomly. We're doing it manually.
They're rolling dice.
Actually, for the last audit, I used a random number formula in Excel and sorted the numbers randomly.
Well, and presumably
and
you
chose
still have to
5%.
do that because not everybody is going to be on this system. And so we're still going to have to sample the entire population of people that are eligible for audit, I would presume.
Well, it's anybody that renewed is eligible for audit.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I mean, but if only 10% of the people in Missouri, for example, are on that system, you got another 90% out there that's not on it.
And I just want to chime in and address that question really quick. The audit pool, we do use an audit selection tool that's very random. It's a script that's written to run on. And for Missouri, we pulled from the entire population because we have that entire ALD data set. So it wasn't pulled off of just the 10,000 that are using the site. In fact, it wasn't even open to everyone until after that audit was completed. So we would pull off of the entire population based on a set of business rules or criteria that would be agreed to by the board. For example, must be active licensees, must have been licensed for at least 3 full years, can't have been included in the last consecutive audit. There's a whole little list of business rules that we would agree on, and then we would write that into a script and randomly select off of the whole population.
I guess I have one other question. We have a coordinator in our firm that coordinates all the CPE records, which I presume most everybody has that. But would they have access to each individual? I guess you can grant access to each individual CPA in the firm to that individual to do the records. In other words, I could take my certificates to her and just say here,
Absolutely.
and then she could just get in there.
You could give her your login ID
Right.
and say here.
They have all of them anyway. So.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
Are we headed in the direction in our discussion here of requiring everybody to submit their CPE records if they're selected for audit through this process?
That's kind of where I was headed. I don't know about
Okay.
everybody else, but I think it'd be very difficult to mandate the entire population to use the system.
But I agree with
And
you.
so
At this point,
I
anyway.
think to start off in this fashion would be the appropriate step. That's my personal opinion, but I'll take whatever recommendations y'all want to bring. there's no more discussion, I'll entertain a motion to move forward with it.
So move.
And that motion would be that we require those selected for audit would be required to use the new NASBA system.
Can we include in there that we open it up for anyone that wants to participate?
I think, yes, I would agree with that. It's an option that is available to the general public.
I would also suggest that we have an opt-out provision, like she suggested in Missouri, where you're going to have some folks that for whatever reason don't want to use the technology,
Right.
that we have some mechanism where they can still do that if they need to. I mean, when we say we're going to require, I mean, Missouri required, but they had an opt-out, and it's just like e-filing for the IRS, right? I mean, there's an opt-out provision.
I second the motion with the 2 additions.
Okay. So I have a motion to, I say require with an opt-out provision that those selected for audit submit CPE records via the NASBA software
And it can be used by others.
and be open to the general public for their own consumption. So I have a motion, I have a second. Any discussion?
Second that motion.
Mr. Bluffus did.
Okay.
I guess I would hope as part of this, and particularly the voluntary part of it, that somebody takes a lead in communicating with our members that this is a tool that's available to them so that we can see what kind of response you get. But I guess I'm thinking about our firm. You know, we've got a system for reporting this, and I think most significant accounting firms do, but there are a lot of CPAs in the industry and private practice that don't have a tool out there unless they're aware of maybe the TSCPA tool, which may not help them if they're in Georgia or somewhere else. I could just see where with this tool it could help them keep up with where they are and help them comply better with you know, the rules and regulations.
Sure.
So
I look at it as another tool.
yeah,
It's just
and,
available.
but we need to communicate that some way, that it's available and encourage them to give it a try, I think.
We can do a mass mail out, Casey. We can do a letter like Missouri did, and we can send it out to our population and let them know that this is available for them to use.
Okay.
Do we have email addresses in all our members?
Not on everybody, no.
And this may assist with some of that down the road.
Is that not a requirement now, though, that, you know, of our renewal, that we have an active email address?
It is a requirement, but we are not getting email addresses for everybody at this point.
What are we doing about that?
Nothing at this point.
What are we going to do about that?
We will contact them and get email addresses.
All right, let's go back to the vote
I
here.
wanted to ask the question, would a person access this program through the state board website, or would they access it through NASBA?
I think there will be a link on both. Is that not right? There will be a link on the Tennessee website so that you can go to our website and that will take you directly to this.
Okay.
They could go there directly if they know the URL. I guess it would be tn.cpetracking.com, so they could go there directly just by typing that in. Or certainly we highly recommend that the board offer a link from their website directly to the login page, and then we would be happy to host a link to the Tennessee login page as well on the NASBA site if you'd like.
When do you think this would be available if we move forward with it?
If I wanted to move forward, we could have it up in 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, we could do it right away. We were kind of starting really early in case the Tennessee Society was interested in trying to be part of that. Wanted to make sure that we allotted plenty of time to, at least at a bare minimum, we wanted to have it all ready for the spring audits. But you know, that makes a lot of sense actually to not wait. And that way, if people are interested in using it, I mean, as soon as you all are ready, we could go ahead and set it up, and we could work with Mark, and we're happy to help with any communication efforts. You know, we're pretty good at that. We have, you guys get our stuff all the time. We,
Might work against us.
yeah, I know. I mean, we can do email blasts. We can put together some attractive things to help promote it, encourage people to adopt it a little bit. But we could start that process anytime you're ready, really. The main goal was to have it up and ready for the board staff for the spring audits next year.
Well, and some of the CPAs are going into a slow period right now. Maybe this is a good opportunity for them to.
Maybe it is a good time.
Instead of vacation.
Yeah.
I've got one quick question. In the spirit of skating to where the puck may be, is there going to be an app for this?
Is there going to be an app? Yeah, I would think that would be great.
Well, you could just take a picture
listen,
of
I
the
want an app
certificate.
for everything we do. I'm
There you go.
asking for.
Take
I'm
a
asking
picture
for
on
an
your phone,
exam
and then
app.
it automatically uploads into your.
You can do
account.
checks that way. You might as well do
That would be
CP
great.
certificate.
One other point, though. I
Is that a
wanted-
plan, or
Oh yes, definitely. Absolutely. Long term, we're wanting to transition all of our resources over to apps.
like sooner than later, or 6 years?
Yeah,
Or?
probably be a little later. Yeah, probably a little later.
You got to get people on the system first.
That's where the puck's going to be, by the way.
You're absolutely
The
right.
actually, the puck is there.
I've been telling Pat Hartman we need an app for applying for the CPA exam, because that's what students need to be doing, right? And then the email address thing, we have a mechanism. I didn't show it to you, but we have a mechanism set up. If you log into your account on this platform as a CPA, and you're voluntarily deciding you're going to go check it out, if we do not have, the board, with your feed, if we do not have a valid email address on file for that record, the very first thing that pops up is a window that says, we need to collect a valid email address from you. Because we knew, having a digital system, that we would have to have a way to communicate with people electronically. So they cannot even get into their account until they have entered a valid email address on file. And so then what we do is, what we've been doing is once a week, we've been pulling a report and sending that to the Missouri board, and like, here's all the new email addresses we've captured for you, so that they can get them added into their e-licensing system. But now that we've opened up the reporting tools to the board staff, and that you all, Mark and his team, would actually have the ability to pull that report anytime they would like, to see what new email addresses have been added into the system, so they can be putting them back in there.
I had one last question. From an administration standpoint at the firm level, can you see a global of the people in your firm, or is it just on an individual CPA basis?
This is really a board. This was created for boards.
For the board.
This was created just for boards to use for managing their CPE audits. So
Seems like if you want to push people into the system, y'all might consider adding some of that functionality to the system, so that if they want to use it as the firm tracking mechanism, that it has that capacity to do so. But
Yeah.
anyways, I'd like to keep this vote moving along. So is there any more discussion on the motion, which now I'll have to try to remember? We had the caveat that it was going to be, there was going to be an opt-out, that there is mandatory for those under audit. There was one more.
Available to.
Available to the general public.
Can I ask one quick question?
Yes.
If we do choose to do this pilot, and let's just say 2 years down the road we choose to do something else, what's the difficulty of getting these records out into another system or into, an archive? Because I assume this is going to be where we store all the data from previous audits. Is that a concern, Mark? Or if there's a fee that's charged that we don't see appropriate, and we want to make a change, or we take bids on it, or however we do it, is that a concern that our data's stuck in this program?
Amy, that's a question for you, I think.
We can.
Could you please step up to the mic? Thank you.
We had a similar situation when we offered CPE tracking to just individual CPAs to purchase a subscription several years ago, and then we decided not to do that anymore. We were able to export the data and provide it to them in a format that they could download or use however they wished. So in a similar situation, if you were to choose another vendor, we would be able to get that information out of the system and to you to use in your new whatever application you chose. Now, if it came down to helping you write a script to like do a direct import, that may be a different question, because that would involve a developer time and so forth. So we would have to consider the scope of that at that time. But as far as getting the data out into some sort of a CSV file or something like that could be imported elsewhere, that's entirely possible.
So essentially, the data could be owned by the state.
Yes, the data is yours.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, any other discussion? All right, we'll have a motion. I have a second of that motion. Discussion is closed, so all those in favor of offering the pilot program, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it, so we are piloting. I think Mr. Stewart ought to be the first person to use it.
I'll need some help.
$100
per hour. $100 an hour, man. As a consultant, huh?
All right, let's try to move on with the agenda here. We've got the NASBA committee reports. Jennifer is not here, so Mark, do you have anything to present on board effectiveness and legislative support committee?
No, I spoke to Jennifer, and she said she had no report for this meeting.
Good. All right, Troy, Uniform Accountancy Act Committee.
The UAA committee did not meet in person, but we did have some conference calls, and an exposure draft was completed. And I want to make sure everybody has a copy. So what I've done, I just have a copy of the exposure draft that was completed. And that way, if you have a question, it's 21 pages, so I'd rather not go through all the pages of adjustments. So I'd rather just give everybody a copy of what was exposed, and that way you'll have it. So, Mark, I'll get you a copy.
That's cool, Bill.
Like I said, I'll be brief, but this exposure draft, the UAA committee has worked on parts of this since I know at least December, probably in late 12, or I mean at least, well, I'd say probably a year or longer. And so we've gone back and forth with the changes, and they'd be approved, or they'd have a question, we'd go back and work on some things. I like to say it's a lot of information that is included in this, but so instead of going through all the data, you're able to have a copy, and if you have a response or if you see anything in that exposure draft, I think they're taking comments through January 17th, 2014, and you're able to, if you need to respond to them, you're able to, and I think at that point, from what I understand, the UAA committee will meet again for mobility issues, if there are some. Probably a week or two after that, we'll meet in person to see if there's anything we need to change. Exposure draft has gone through or anything at that point. So, at least for the last 3 months, this is what's happened. We finally have an exposure draft of mobility for firms. And then we will probably address some new issues in January of 2014, in other words. So that is my report for UAA.
Any questions for Troy? All right. Let's move into the board committee reports. Law and rules, back to you, Troy.
We did have some proposed rule changes, which are on, I think there's a one-page report on your iPad. We did have let me see if I get in addition to rule number 0020-4 5-.03, and I think we added a number 9 to that rule. And this was concerning the failure to pay your professional privilege tax on time as required by law. And this statement just added a little more detail to what we were trying to find. I think this may have started that we had a lot of cost involved for these items when they came to our team. That they were 2 years old. They would start the process of trying to relieve this, and then the fee would be paid to the Tennessee Department of Revenue, and then our cost would be spent. We had no way to recoup it. So we were trying to find some direct words to change that issue. So that's where that proposed rule change came in. Then we had we actually almost had a rewrite. If you look below that in bold print, and this would be Rule 0020-05-.08, and these would include the we tried to alleviate the state-specific CPE 2 hours that were required, and I think if you can look through there, we kind of detailed more or less to be specific for each type of hours that are required and what rules would be applied to those. So, I mean, if you look down through 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6, you'll see it's just kind of detailed. I think these is what has gone on here with these rules. Are there any discussion on that part? There's a few more words to that change of that rule.
But in effect, most of it was just to clarify.
To clarify and to make it more specific.
Better explain.
Right.
On the 8 additional hours, is there a specific type of hour they have to require? For example, if they miss the 2-hour ethics, is it supposed to be,
Got you. I'm not sure if we actually, I don't think we discussed that yesterday, but I would hope that those would be state-specific hours.
If they do not complete the state-specific hours, Charlene, the idea was they would have to complete those hours plus an 8-hour penalty.
8 hours could be in
Anything.
anything?
Mm-hmm. That has historically been the way that it's worked.
And part of the reason for the clarification, if you look back up above to -5-.03, including a 2-hour state-specific ethics course, not that we thought the current rules didn't specify it, because we did, but just to make very clear that 2-hour state-specific is a prerequisite for renewal, meaning you don't do it, you don't get to renew. So in our minds, that addition kind of covers the situation that you're discussing from the standpoint that they're not going to be able to do an 8-hour penalty that doesn't include ethics and then not get to do ethics. So they have to do the 2 plus 8 more.
Chris, we can't do this now, right? Or do we have to be in a rulemaking session or not?
Yes, but what I would need for today is a vote to approve this language so that
Enter it in for the next rules.
so that these proposed rules could start the process of going to the governor's office and then up through the assistant commissioner, such that we could hopefully have a rulemaking hearing to get these in January.
Okay. All right. Do I have a motion for that?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion. I have a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, passes. Roy, you good?
Ray, that's the only 2 rules we discussed.
Okay. All right, Stephen, you want to move on with the licensing committee?
Yes, we had 6 items, or 6 requests to review. I'm going to present them
collectively or together, and then we can vote on them at the end if that's okay with you. The first item we had was a request for accounting tools, request for their CP or their ethics course approval. We reviewed it last meeting, and we'd requested more information, an outline of the course, and more detail of the specifics of the course. They presented it. The committee feels it's adequate. Staff feels it's adequate and covers the requirements, and we recommend accepting that application. The second item was a request from Art Taylor to have his CPA exam extended, or credit extended. Mr. Taylor had suffered some nerve damage due to a procedure he underwent, and he's has not been able to work. He has passed the ANA and the BEC sections, and I believe in the documentation, his doctor said they expected to have a lot of improvement this fall, and he had asked for an extension, and the committee has recommended giving, make sure I'm right on this on the minutes, but 6-month extension beginning November, beginning the start of the next cycle of November 2013, or 2 test windows, 6 months. The committee did recommend approving that. The third item we had was a request from the Knoxville CFMA organization to qualify as exempt CPE sponsor. The committee reviewed their request and some of the topics of the courses that they've offered, and we just felt it was not in the best interest of the board right now to accept that request, and we recommend denying based on the lack of relevance of the courses to the CPA industry. The fourth item was a request from Richard Brown for his approval of his CPA certificate. Mr. Brown had a rough past and had gotten into some trouble in the past, and was very open about his past and how he had turned it around, and he's passed all 4 parts of the CPA exam, and he's passed the ethics as well. I think the issue that created the question where Mark presented it to the board was the fact that he had a felony on his record when the TBI had done a background check. The committee felt that obviously everybody deserves a second chance, and he has been a good citizen since the last incident, which I believe was in 2002. Is that right? Or 2000 was his last incident, so he's been a good citizen, I guess, for quite some time. So the committee did recommend approval of his CPA certificate. Item 5 was a
What
request.
was the felony for?
Second DUI. Is that
I would
right?
encourage everybody to read his letter. It's in the, it's in your information here, but it was a pretty well-written letter.
Very open about
Yeah.
everything.
No, I know. I mean,
The committee did recommend approval of his CPA certificate. The fifth item was a request from Matt Walden, who completed the Graduate School of Banking program. He was asking for course credit, for CPE credit for the courses he completed. He was requesting management CPE, I believe. Is that the correct?
Management advisory.
Management advisory CPE for the corresponding hours he completed in the graduate course. We have granted, we looked back and reviewed it, and we have granted others the same credit for the same course in the past. And based on this, the committee recommends approval and acceptance of this CPE as management advisory CPE. Is that the correct term?
That's only for the hours that were within the renewal period, or is that retroactive, just for the record? These courses are over a period of time. He
Only
was
for the ones
granted.
that are in his renewal period.
Okay,
That's what he's looking for.
okay, thank you.
Questions on that one? And the last one was a request from Laura Wright for extension of credit for the BEC section. Miss Wright was taking the, let me get these correct. She was taking the AUD section, and while taking that, she got sick and had to go to the hospital and was diagnosed with food poisoning. As a result, she obviously didn't get credit for that, taking that AUD section, and because she didn't pass that section, her BEC section would expire. Is that clear on that? So additionally, so I guess the committee considered, well, we're having to make an assumption that she would have actually passed that AUD section. Well, she previously had passed AUD, but it had expired as well. So the committee discussed this pretty extensively and decided that we would give her a one exam or we would recommend granting her a one exam window, which would expire on March the 31st, 2014, to give her time to pass the AUD section, and we would extend the BEC credit to March 31st, and at that point it would expire. That's all the items we discussed. If there's any questions about any of them, I'll be glad to go back and give more details.
Have any questions for Stephen? I will entertain a motion to accept the board's the committee's recommendations.
So move.
Okay, I have a motion. I have a second. Mr. Blofus. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of accepting the committee's recommendations signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, so moved. All right, we'll move on into the executive committee. Really, all we did yesterday was cover primarily financial information. And I think really the main issue that had come up was the state has changed its methodology that they're used to compute the state regulatory fee. This is an expense to our board. They went from charging $5 annually to charging $10 every 2 years. And so, in effect, we got dinged. This year, it will level itself out, but effectively our expenses seem a little bit higher because of that very fact of the timing of when they charge that fee. So the other thing that we did is we discussed travel and getting some reporting set up on how to track all that and compare that. So we're very sensitive to the travel budget, but we had no major issues there. So outside of that, I don't think we had anything else on that. So Don, do you want to go ahead and start the probable cause committee update?
Yes. First of all, I'd like to have Mr. Mills, would you give your presentation on the status of open complaints, please? That corresponds to your tab on your laptops or
Yes,
iPads.
this is in your laptop. I've got my usual status of open complaint report. You can see the numbers there. This is actually for the entire year. The last 4 meetings, this will cover all our cases. Everything is pretty much staying close to where it has. We do have a slight increase in the cases that have come in that are open, but they have not come back from response. The complaints have gone out for response. Total cases for the year, pretty much on the average. Joyce and I discussed the possibility of showing a little more information next time as far as the flow of coming in, worked, resolved, and presented to the board within the same quarter. So I'm going to
Questions? I think Mark pointed out yesterday that we've received notices on failure to pay the privilege tax, so we're going to see a spike, fair warning, in this at our next meeting of opened cases, and that are related primarily to our collection process for failure to file or failure to pay the privilege tax. You'll find on your iPad the tab, let's see, legal reports. You're going to have to go to your handwritten version that's been passed out to you. There's been an update since the iPads were loaded. The only change to that, for those that have had an opportunity to read those, I believe, is in item number 10. Let the record show I'm recusing myself from. Most of the cases, with the exception of 15 and got too many reports here. And 15 relate to professional privilege license or letters of cease and desist for correction of deficiencies. We have approved, the committee asked that you approve all these. I'd like to handle number 15 separately because of the complexities of it. We had spent a long time yesterday, and I don't want the board to feel like we're not giving you a chance to vote on individual cases. So if each one of you would look through your report again, and if there's anything other than case 15 that you'd like to discuss independently, I'd like to motion to accept the committee recommendation to authorize the penalties and actions set forth by our staff, attorneys, and recommendations, with me recusing myself on.
Make the motion, but do you want to break out, do we need to break out 10 separately, or is it okay just to, how do you
I
want
think
to
you can do a motion for 1 through 14 with Mr. Royston recusing on number 10, and if there's going to be discussion on 15, you handle that one separately.
I would make a motion to accept items 1 through 14 with Mr. Royston recusing himself on item 10.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. On 15, Mr. Whitaker, would you just give us a summary of 15 with some of the extra flavors that we discussed yesterday, and information that is not in the document so people understand, because it is a confusing case as many times as you read it.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Royston. Very briefly, I think the summary from your report of item 15, is as good a summary as there is possible. But again, there are some issues here that I would like to go through. Specifically, I'd like to note that the respondent CPA in this matter previously did have his license revoked and did go to jail for filing a false tax return. Had his license revoked, but got it back maybe 6 years after the revocation. And so now he had been previously working for a CPA firm who is the complainant in this matter, and essentially the firm's position is that the CPA that his violation of internal firm policies and procedures relative to not getting partner signatures before work product went out the door constitutes a disciplinary violation, because from the firm's perspective, it was the requirement for partner review was essentially a demotion for the respondent, because he had previously been able to sign off by himself on work product before it went out the door, but due to firm concerns about the quality of his work product, the firm instituted for him specifically a requirement for partner review, which by the respondent signing a partner's name when, or initials when that partner was out of town or unavailable, the firm's position is that he circumvented that requirement. The something that is not contained in your summary, the file does contain at least two, the firm calls them affidavits, but I essentially would call them letters of understanding, where the firm says, okay, Mr. CPA, you have violated internal firm policies and procedures in this manner. We have had a discussion about it. You understand, A, you admit that you did it, and B, that you understand that it's wrong and you're not going to do it again. Signed, partner, respondent, and a witness. There are two of those in the file. So it isn't as if the respondent in this matter was unaware that there were some issues regarding his performance at the firm. Something else of note, the complaint comes in, respondent submits a response through counsel, and then after the respondent's response comes in, the complainant submits additional documentation from at least 3 different clients. Is that correct, Ray? Reflecting varying degrees of unhappiness from the client with the respondent's work product, ranging from failure to complete tasks by deadline, potentially causing problems with the IRS, and and I think in one case, the client said, hey, look, we're willing to stay with you guys as a firm, but if you don't write off the CPA's time for his work, we're not going to stick with you. So that's something else to consider. For the respondent's part, through his counsel, that his argument is that this is at worst an employment matter, a dispute between he as a now former employee and the firm as his former employer. He and his counsel maintain and believe that the firm is attempting ongoing currently, and had even attempted before they filed the complaint, to use the board complaint process as leverage regarding his employment situation, whether to keep him there or whether to insist that he retire and not go back to work or not go to work for someone else. How things ended between the firm and this respondent, a mutual agreement was reached that due to the respondent's medical condition, that they would mutually agree to part company. It was not a termination for cause, as I understand it. However, a few months after the respondent left the firm began getting requests from what had been former clients of the firm for records and documents, so that this respondent, who was now the new CPA for the firm's former clients, could do work for his new clients and the firm's old clients. And again, according to the respondent, he said, look, I did the partner initial thing to expedite workflow. It was not intended to circumvent anything. The firm is just mad that I left and some clients went with me, and I don't really think they should have the right necessarily to insist that I retire or not come back from medical leave or not go back to work, and they shouldn't be able to use the board complaint process to enforce their will on my career, essentially. Those are all things that the committee considered yesterday in coming to the disciplinary recommendation set forth in the recommendation section. I will share that the original recommendation from investigators did not include the 2 years of probation. That is something that I added simply because if we were dealing with a respondent who did not have the kind of prior disciplinary history that this person has, probably would have just stuck with the civil penalty and the state-specific ethics. But, you know, if you've been revoked and gone to prison before for filing a false or tax return, you know, I don't know how you can assess discipline without at least some probation to have this individual understand that, you know, for as long as this probation lasts, the board is paying attention closely, and any future violations during this time, and your license is probably gone again. So with that, if there are any further questions that the board wishes to ask myself and or Mr. Butler, be happy to try to answer them.
Were there any complaints by clients, or were they all made by the firm?
The only complaint we have was filed by the firm. The documents that appeared to reflect unhappiness on the part of clients were submitted as a supplementary documentation by the firm to its complaint.
I guess my only concern here is that you do get into some of these issues of he said, and I worry that we get in the middle of something like that. And I mean, I've got employees that have messed up before, or I've been yelled at by clients. I mean, I just want to make sure, and I'm sure y'all vetted this yesterday, I just don't make sure we're not getting into the middle of something here that, are we protecting the public here in this situation, or are we settling a internal issue? And that would be my only concern here.
That was discussed very lengthy yesterday. The other thing is that when you need to know is that the return that he filed fraudulent.
Okay.
And I think, and they want to elaborate on that, but it was his own return that he filed.
And Mr. Butler covered this, so if I'm misspeaking, please say so. But the original conviction, which, you know, should bear some weight on discipline in this matter if there's going to be discipline, but should not be an independent cause for discipline. As I understand it, there were allegations that he was embezzling money, but the district attorney could not prove the embezzlement. But when this person filed his taxes, there was income he couldn't account for, so they went with the old Al Capone strategy. Can't get you for the crime, so we're going to get you for the tax evasion, or filing a false tax return in this case. And so that's what happened there. I understand and appreciate Mr. Watkins' concern about the internal employment dispute prong of things, and in all candor, absent the prior false tax return, I'd be more inclined to write it off to a he said employment thing, and, you know, give him a letter of warning and send him on his way. But when you take into account the prior disciplinary action and the the documentation we received about potential problems with his work product relative to client performance, that's what kind of tipped the scales towards discipline. Now, what I will say is that,
I mean, do we know that? Do we know that the product was deficient? I guess that's the question.
And that's the other thing. Basically, there are two options here. The board could vote to table this matter until January for additional investigation of the, actual allegations as it pertains to work product. And if it appears that those can be substantiated, then they can move forward on that basis and kind of set aside the employment part of this.
I don't want to overturn anything the committee discussed yesterday, because obviously y'all have more facts, but I'm just voicing a concern from that perspective.
Well, I'll say from my standpoint, he's acknowledged that he forged the partner's initials on the papers. That's personally what I've got an issue with, okay? Right. Work product and all of that, I mean, I agree with you. We can't.
He has, though, acknowledged, and correct me if I'm wrong, by signing the internal memos of agreement that he's been corrected for substandard work. The two documents, the two instances that are in the form file, Ray, you may speak to this, please, said, yes, I acknowledge that I did not follow this, not signing off on the, he acknowledged that as well, but these were when he was taken away from his own review and requiring a partner review prior to release. Is that correct?
I guess my question, and the signature, I agree with you. You can't tolerate any of that. I just wonder if is that an issue for us, or is that a issue for the firm itself, an employment issue? I mean, he went around firm policy. I guess my question is that a disciplinary issue for this board?
Well,
And I don't know the answer.
After they've discovered that, he offered to resign, and they rejected his resignation, and he worked there for another year.
Really? Right.
So, I mean, I have as many questions about the firm as I do about the guy.
That's right.
I share Mr. Watkins' concerns. This just sounds like a firm quality control issue to me more than a state board regulatory issue. I mean, if he was not complying with firm policy and was not performing as he should as an employee or whatever his position, the firm, as a matter of fact, should have dealt with that. And if that meant termination or whatever, but they should not use, I agree, the threat of filing some complaint with the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy to discipline or control their employee. To me, this does not, I mean, I don't see what rule or regulation has been broken here.
And to your point, Mr. Stewart, I'm here to present options and advice and let the board do its will. So there's at least an argument to be made that if that part of this complaint is to be construed as an employment matter, then the back and forth with the memos and the offers of resignation, and that didn't happen, and then they mutually agreed to part company, is at least arguable that whatever employment-related sins were committed, those were covered and disposed of as part of their separation of employer-employee. Now, what I would say is that if that is going to be the board's thoughts on the employment part of things, then I would, at least before the complaint gets closed, request that this be tabled until January for additional investigation of the potential work product issues, not from the sense of trying to dig up or find something, but those are things in the file, and the board absolutely has not only the authority, but in my mind the responsibility, if something comes up that is a public protection issue potentially, even if it was not initially raised as one of the primary drivers of the complaint, if it's discovered in the course of an investigation, I think it at least bears looking into. So, and that's just, if the board is going to go that route on the employment part, then I would request to change my recommendation and remove this from the report entirely and bring it back in January for a report on the work product part.
How does the committee feel about that? Because again, I don't want to go over y'all's heads as far as what y'all decided.
Discussed both pro and con. We discussed also the possibility that we ought to look at the firm to see if there's not a smoking gun on that side as well, by allowing somebody to continue to work, et cetera, knowing there's a work product issue. And Chris's answer, we initially said, okay, we'll go along with it because.
Right.
But, I think Mr. Alexander pointed out yesterday that a board back in 2003 did vote to reinstate his license, saying he had paid his debt to society, et cetera, and had turned himself around. And, I have a little problem, and as I think Mr. Alexander did yesterday, in holding that against him at this point.
Because you've dealt with that issue.
Maybe we don't have the facts, and
Right.
This tabling idea is, maybe we ought to get all the facts before we.
Can I ask a question again about the dates? I'm a little confused. So
Sure.
he worked there, the offenses occurred, the two memos, and then he stayed there another year? And at what point did the firm file a complaint against him? How long was he gone before they filed a complaint?
This is a guesstimate because I don't have the file in front of me. Ray, would you say like 3 months maybe? Something like that? about how long after he left? I thought he left in November maybe, and the complaint didn't come in until after the first of the year.
It left after the October 15 deadline.
So
Okay.
he left in October. They waited 3 months and then they filed against him.
And I think the issue was is they started getting requests for documentation from clients, and they started uncovering some of the issues. That's what I heard. I think you
With
say.
when the next tax season started to heat up in January, unbeknownst to the firm, some of the former clients of the firm had now gone with this CPA, and he was now representing them. And in order for him to do work for them, he had to get their records and documents from the old firm, and then a complaint gets filed.
Their reason being that he had a health issue and decided to retire. They decided, okay, he's going to not be practicing anymore, not going to be a risk to anybody, so we'll just let it all go. Next thing they find out, he's back in practice again, so it's kind of like, oh, he didn't just go and retire. He's back practicing again, and that's not where we think he ought to be.
I guess
In
my
his own
thoughts.
firm, or is he in his own firm with a registered firm, or is he
No, he
working
went
for
to
somewhere
work
else?
for another firm.
The question I have is if they felt they had grounds to file a complaint, why didn't they file the complaint when the violation occurred? I mean, it just seems like a retaliatory response. Hey, we worked out a deal, everything's fine, we're all happy. 3 months later, oh, you took my client, so now I'm going to file a complaint. To me, it seems the complaint was filed as I hate to use revenge, but retaliation of taking clients, not for violating the policy. If it was, they would have filed the complaint back at that time when they allegedly had the
The answer to
complaint.
that was what I just explained.
Right.
Well, that in fact is exactly what the respondent, through his attorney, said, almost verbatim.
So if I understand, Chris, you're recommending that we table this because you believe there are more facts that could be discovered?
Yes, because through the course of not only the committee discussion, but also the full board discussion, given the concerns about the employment end of things, I would at least like to make sure we have all the facts on the work product, because if there are some work product issues that can be uncovered and independently verified separate from the employment thing, then that would allow the board to consider those things separately and say, even if we don't think the employment sins were issues that rise to the level of a disciplinary matter, there still may be something out there in terms of the work product, so we will move forward with discipline, if at all, on that basis. But if we look into it and it just doesn't look like something that can be proven up on a formal hearing on the work product end of things, then the only decision to be made would be about the employment part. And whatever that decision is whatever it is. But I think Bill's point is well taken about making sure we have all the facts before the board makes a decision.
Chairman, I'm good with that personally, yes. And I think. I would
All right,
entertain a
so,
motion
yeah, I was going to
then,
say, do a motion on that.
To table for further investigation.
Second, I'll second.
Bill, and
Bill,
second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, by like sign. Motion carries.
Mr. Eldridge, do you need to
I
step?
just did. How about
I
that?
think so. Hey,
We
are
have
we
one
voting
more
on,
report.
I'm sorry.
Yes,
Go ahead.
except there you are. You have a report for us. You'll find under tab supplemental legal, I believe is the title
Oh.
under your, Mr. Joseph.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Royston. Do you all have this on your iPad?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, can I interrupt just for 1
Sure.
second? Mr. Eldridge needs to leave. I just want to be sure before he goes. Are we okay? Do we have to vote on this Edgar G? Do we have?
Vote on that. But
Do we?
we'll have a quorum.
We will, even without him?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You're good. Thank you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Royston. I have two matters that are before you on a supplemental legal report relative to matters that were referred for formal proceeding. This first matter involves a respondent, as the board can ascertain, who failed to pay her professional privilege taxes going back until about 2009. A previous consent order was authorized for this respondent that was sent by Mr. Whitaker in early 2012 by certified mail. That came back unclaimed. Mr. Whitaker then commenced additional communications with this respondent by telephone and email. For whatever reason, the consent order did not get signed during 2012. In January of 2013, he sent a second version of this prior consent order to her by email. She did not sign that proposed order. The case was referred to me in April of this year for the commencement of a formal proceeding, the filing of a notice of charges. I filed that in June of this year. After the respondent was served with the notice of hearing and charges, she indicated to me that she never received the first consent order that Mr. Whitaker sent to her by certified mail because she was out of town, and of course that mail was returned to sender. As to the second proposed consent order that Mr. Whitaker sent her in January of 2013, she indicated that she did not receive that by email because her private email account settings were such that all of her email from the state of Tennessee or from this department was going to her spam box or her trash box. She's indicated to me that she's changed that in July of this year, and she has been receiving emails from me since this summer. After the filing of the notice of hearing and charges, the respondent then energetically came up with the money to pay all of her professional privilege taxes. She has paid all of her professional privilege taxes for calendar years 2009 through 2013. She's paid penalties in an amount exceeding $2,000. I don't know the exact amount. It might have been $2,100 or $2,200 after they added interest and penalties to the Department of Revenue. We received a clearance letter from the Department of Revenue indicating that she currently has a zero balance. I recommended a revised settlement proposal. The respondent has indicated, although I don't know if this is really mitigating, because she understood that she had an obligation to pay the professional privilege taxes when they were due. But she has indicated that she will pay a $750 civil penalty to the state for the underlying conduct, not paying her professional privilege taxes on time, and to reimburse the state the $200 in investigatory and hearing costs that we have incurred through the filing of the formal proceeding. And she's asked me for an additional 4 months from the end of September to pay that because of her financial circumstances and the fact that she has a child that's just gone to college this fall. If she doesn't pay by January 31st, 2014, her license is revoked on the next business day per her agreement. But based upon the fact that I do believe the respondent understands now the need to comply with the Department of Revenue's requirements and that she'll timely pay those in the future, that is my hope. I do hope that this proposal is sufficient. We have had other cases over the past 3 to 4 years where a civil penalty roughly in this amount was assessed after the filing of a formal charge, and the respondent has signed an agreed final order in this first case, and I would recommend that this final order be approved by the board.
Watkins, our committee recommended approval of his proposal and agreeing with it.
Okay. Do you want to vote on that one separately? I guess we have another one too here, right?
There were two.
Do you want to go ahead and vote on this one matter?
Entirely up to you. There,
Okay.
we approved both of the.
Why don't you go ahead and read the second one, and then
All right.
we'll take one vote.
The second matter involves an individual whose CPA license expired in December of 2010, and this gentleman, again, has no firm permit. The respondent was the president of a municipal utility in the state of Tennessee. Between 2007 and May of 2010, the respondent misappropriated a tremendous amount of the district's funds, more than $90,000 for his personal use by the fraudulent use of a credit card, by directing an unauthorized extra paycheck to himself, and by receiving an improper travel advance. This matter was investigated both by the district in terms of an internal audit as well as by auditors of the Comptroller of the Treasury's Division of Municipal Audit. In the summer of 2010, the state auditors with the Comptroller of the Treasury determined that the respondent had misappropriated in excess of $95,000 in district funds to his personal use. The respondent had been released from employment sometimes that spring or summer of 2010. In 2011, he was charged by the county grand jury in a 2-count indictment with theft over $60,000, which is a B felony, as well as fraudulent use of a credit card, also a B felony based on those misappropriations. Between 2010 and apparently sometimes in late 2011, the respondent repaid the entirety of these misappropriations to the district. He was indicted in December of 2011 for the reason that the respondent went through 2 prior attorneys before he was appointed a public defender, in addition to the fact that a prior trial judge had to recuse himself and they had to have a special judge appointed. This case did not come back to court for a guilty plea until late August of this year. As you see, the respondent entered guilty pleas. He was sentenced to 10 years with the Department of Corrections. He didn't have to serve or doesn't have to serve but 10 days jail time and 9 years, 355 days on supervised probation. He is also required to complete 40 hours of community service per year of probation, which would be 400 hours, and he was ordered to make a special contribution to the utility district's fund for payment of utility bills for underprivileged individuals during the winter months. The court order simply says he's got to pay that by the end of his probation, which would be in 10 years. We have recommended, as the board is aware, a consent order allowing the respondent to voluntarily, that his license will be voluntarily revoked, that he would not be eligible to petition the board for any reinstatement of his license until 5 years after that order is entered, and that if the respondent ever desires to appear in person before the board, he has to request reinstatement, he would have to appear in person before the board. We had considered recommending the imposition of a certain civil penalty in this case. At the same time, given the fact that the respondent has fully paid restitution, the district has been made whole, he's serving his debt to society, and he has the $10,000 special contribution to make within that 10-year period, and given the other circumstances which I've set forth in my report to the effect that since 2011, he's lost 2 jobs, he's living with his mother in another county because he has no home. He lost his home. He was represented by the public defender's office in criminal court due to indigency, and he has indicated to me, and this seemingly has been confirmed by his probation officer, that he has virtually no financial resources. I considered that the imposition or the assessment of a civil penalty and cost would be uncollectible against this respondent, and that the entry of an order voluntarily revoking his license would adequately protect the interests of the public and constitute a sufficient deterrent to others. Accordingly, the respondent has signed such an agreed order and has transmitted that to me on October the 11th, and I have that proposed order with me today, and I would recommend that the board approve that consent order.
Watkins, our committee recommends approval by the board.
We have the motion to accept the recommendation of the committee's recommendations. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you.
Concludes our report.
Move into old business. Mark, do you have anything under old business?
The only thing I'd address, Mr. Chairman, is the fact that we now have received an application from a candidate for the Peer Review Oversight Committee from West Tennessee. So we now have one candidate from each section. We can move forward that process. And the
Who is
committee-
that person?
Kathy Sanborn.
Okay. Do you want to update us real quick on the ethics? We talked about it briefly yesterday. I don't know who all heard that. On the online or webinar, I guess I should say,
Certainly.
ethics offering.
We have done a dry run-through, so we know that our capability exists to offer such a program. We are looking at trying to do one late November and mid to late December to catch all those people who are desperate to get ethics CPE at the last minute. We will put that on our website and probably put a notice in the newsletter.
Thank you. New business.
I was going to ask a
Go
question.
ahead.
What do you mean you do one? What do you mean by that?
I mean, we'll do one presentation, Henry. It'll be a 2-hour state-specific ethics presentation. We'll do one presentation at the end of November.
Is it a webinar you're talking about?
Yes, it's a live streaming is what we're calling it.
I was thinking I thought we were discussing the idea of letting letting CPAs go on the website anytime they wanted to, and just click on the.
You're talking
program.
more of a self-study type
Right,
system as
right.
opposed to a presentation.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that we can do that because then we have no way of tracking who's there and who's not and whether or not they're still there while we're talking. If we're
I think
live
you
streaming.
can do it because, we do that stuff
Other
all the time.
organizations do it.
Online. You just, what happens usually is a question will pop up at some point during the presentation, or multiple questions, I should say, and they have to be there to answer the question. If they miss it, then they don't pass. But
Let us get to the live streaming part of it first.
I think we're moving in the right direction. We can certainly try to get to that functionality. But yeah, I think if we can continue to move, I think those questions can be dealt with. All right, is that it for old business?
Yes, sir. That's
Okay.
it.
We need to take up the matter of Mr. Edgar G.
On your iPads, you have the, it's under the Edgar G. consent order. You have the consent order that Mr. G. signed in regard to his failure to pay his income tax for 1997 through 2005. The IRS disbarred him from practicing, and as a result, we took action against him as well, put him on probation for 2 years. Mr. G. is here today to address the board to request that his probationary period be lifted. So, Mr. G., if you would, Mr. Chairman, if there are any questions for Mr. G.
Thank you very much.
Let him proceed.
First of all, let me express my appreciation to the board for allowing me to appear today and meet. In the interest of time and consideration for your all's time, I'll be very brief. My request is very simple. I do a lot of seminars. I also do a lot of tax representation and some writing and speaking and things of that nature. The American Institute of CPAs has expressed interest in me doing some seminars again for them next year. 15, 20, possibly 25 or 30 seminars have also expressed interest in allowing me to write a course dealing with independent contractors, an area that I have special expertise in. They feel like that they cannot do that while my license is in probation status. And they have indicated to me that they're willing to send me a contract as soon as the probation status is removed and it can be gone back to active status, and that the time is of the essence because the determination of who's going to teach what courses basically is done between now and the end of January. And if this is not done expeditiously, then I won't even be able to be considered until the following year. So it may not seem like a lot to the members of the board, but at this point in time, $20,000, $25,000, or $30,000 is a significant amount of money to me, and I would ask that the board grant that. I do perform seminars for other groups and have written courses for other groups. This does not seem to be an issue with the other groups, but I appreciate that it's an issue with the American Institute. But I've talked to the people that are in charge of the CPE, and they said they have a contract ready for me to send, that they will send out if the board is willing to lift this. So that's the essence of my appeal. Again, I thank you very, very much for allowing me to be here this morning, and I'll certainly be as responsive as I know how to be to any questions that any of you may have. You're doing what with tax now? As I understood it from the consent order, you were not allowed to practice before the IRS any longer? What that means is you can't be on a 2848. You can't be on a power of attorney. You can do other things. You just simply cannot be the lead on a power of attorney. With
Can you sign tax returns?
Yes. Yes.
You can?
Yes. Simply cannot be in what we call a representative capacity on a 2848. Filed your delinquent tax returns that everything is filed and paid for the last 7 years. The returns were all always filed and always timely filed. That's not in dispute, and that's never been in dispute. We're just simply unable to pay those old years because of a series of catastrophic events that are in the order. By the way, the board needs to be aware that the IRS case, the court agreed that it would be sealed and not released to the public. The IRS violated that almost immediately. So as a result, if you pop up my name on the internet, it's the first thing that shows up. So they're in violation of their own order to keep it silent. Also, the attorney for the board is aware of my 8-page rebuttal to that, showing errors in fact and errors in law, which the IRS has acknowledged, but they said it doesn't matter because they've got what they wanted.
What is management's recommendation?
Be real honest, Mr. Bloffus, the management's recommendation is that you stick with the original consent order and not lift the probationary period. He paid a minimum fine of $500 for his actions, and I just feel a probation for 2 years was appropriate at that time and think it's still appropriate.
This approval, this order is signed June the 27th of 12, so it expires June of 14. So he's asking for 17-month probation or whatever the math is, or thereabouts, as opposed to 24.
Yes, sir.
I believe it expires. I believe that's correct. I believe it expires next summer. But if I am not able to get it lifted now, I won't be able to do any seminars at all for the American Institute or be able to write this course for them for the coming year. I'll have to wait another basically 18 months before I even have the opportunity. And again, $30,000, $25,000 or $30,000, whatever it be, pretty significant to me at this point in time.
Haven't you been teaching these courses for a number of years?
Yes. However, the Institute doesn't feel like that they can have me under contract while my license is in a probation status. They have indicated that they will send a contract as soon as the probation is released. I do teach courses for Western CPE and for Sergeant. I will not be teaching courses for Western CPE in the coming year, so being able to replace those with the American Institute courses would be very significant to me.
Sir G, has anything changed since you filed the consent order or signed the consent order? I believe it was in June 27, 2012. Has anything happened since that date that says the probationary period should be shorter or was inappropriate in the first place?
Well, other than losing even more significant revenue than I already had, basically right now, to be honest before the board, I'm living on a subsistence existence. And this is primarily economic with me. And I realize I'm at the mercy of the board, and I'm begging the board to give me the opportunity to make an extra $25,000 or $30,000 next year, which may not be significant to anyone, but it's significant to me.
When somebody else comes with this same plea, that request as well, are we setting a precedent here?
I don't think you're setting a precedent. The probation period that we entered into, I did not realize that I would have a license that said probation on it. I understood there was a period of probation. I didn't realize the license would have probation, and I really didn't have any idea that it would have this kind of effect on not being able to do the seminars. So it's had a very dramatic effect that way. It's cost me significant money with these two CPE providers.
If you were able to get a reduced probation time since you were assessed a minimal penalty, would you be willing to pay additional penalty for that?
Well, I'm not sure how to respond to that. I hadn't really contemplated that. I guess I'd be receptive to almost anything that the board would consider if we could get this probation lifted right away so I can enter into contracts for the coming year. That is certainly something that I would consider.
The reason I ask is because what I understood during the presentation was that you paid a minimal penalty but agreed to the 2-year probation. And it kind of leads me to believe that the two go hand in hand. Is that correct? Am I understanding that correctly?
I think at the time the thought was with a minimum penalty, the probationary period was kind of the other end of it, if you will, Vic.
Yeah, okay, so my understanding is correct.
Yes, although again, and this may be a technicality or maybe it's just a public information, at the time we entered into this probation, my concept of what that involved is to simply file your taxes and pay what you owe during this 2-year period. I didn't realize there was a particular license or information where it says probation. And obviously that creates problems. I didn't realize that it wouldn't be just a regular license. I just thought I was under like a 2-year monitoring deal, if that makes any sense. Again, I'd be receptive to whatever the board thinks is fair and reasonable. This is something that I have put behind me. I am doing my best to survive professionally. There is no question, if you will indulge me, that I have special expertise in this area of law. I have won cases in 29 states. I'm pretty sure nobody else has done anything like that. It's extremely important to me, and it's going to be even more important in the future going forward.
I share Mr. Bloffus's concerns, and I think Vic's recommendation might be a way to mitigate this issue. I don't like the fact of having to reduce a penalty that we had previously set, because we obviously set the penalty because of the actions that had occurred. So I think regardless of whatever we do, I would suggest that we either take that under consideration, what Mr. Alexander suggested, or we not drop the probationary period at all. So.
I'd like to make a motion, sir.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion that we stick with the original probation due to the clear-cut deals that were made in place and the severity and what I think was personally think was smack to our profession with someone that's teaching the courses, putting that kind of black eye on the society, on our people. And I personally can't see my way clear to reduce a probation that was minimal on the front end.
So I have a motion on the floor to stick with the original probationary period.
Second?
I have a second from Mr. Haas. Any discussion?
What were the other options? The one that he took was the minimum fee and 2 year. Would there have been another option on a higher fee and a lower probationary period?
Sure. Generally the way it works is a civil penalty may range from $0 to $1,000 per violation. With each day, the violation continues being considered a separate violation potentially. Now, does that happen very often in practicality in the real world? No, but for serious ongoing violations where there is serious financial harm, it's at least an option. So what I would say is, absent the probationary period, the barest of minimum civil penalty that probably would have been assessed is $1,000. $500 was actually paid, but in other circumstances where the board has previously dealt with matters of licensees who are suspended from practice before the IRS, typically the civil penalty has been more in the $2,500 range, because typically you don't get sideways with the IRS such that they will suspend you from part or all of the ability to represent based on one single act of conduct that happened on one day. It typically is over time, which would qualify under the violation per day, and get you above the potential $1,000 threshold. So with that said, were the board to consider in effect exchanging the remaining probationary period for a civil penalty of some sort, I think the minimum based on prior board precedent would probably be $2,500. And
in the past, when we've done that, have we done that in conjunction with probation?
it depended on the severity of the circumstances.
Okay.
And it would vary from case to case. If the board thought it was more severe, that could be in addition to something all the way up to revocation or suspension or probation. But it's all on the facts of each individual case. But I just wanted to provide that as a background, just in case that there was a sense among one or more board members to consider that as a possible alternative.
Is a 2-year probationary period, my recollection is that is sort of the standard penalty, probationary period. I don't recall of 1 year being used very often.
I can't recall, and this is my 4th year doing this, I can't recall a 1-year period. I've seen a couple of 5-year probationary periods, though, when, a little bit more serious circumstances, but not such that suspension or revocation was warranted in the board's mind. But typically 2 years is the starting point for probation.
Other discussion? We have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor of not revoking the probationary period signify by saying aye. Aye. Any nays? Hearing none, I'm sorry, Mr. G, but the probationary period will have to stay in place.
Again, let me thank my appreciation to the board for allowing me to appear. I appreciate your considerations and deliberations, and thank you once again for letting me be here.
Thank you.
Could I ask Mr. G a question? I heard something a couple of years ago that the head of the Office of Professional Responsibility actually came to Knoxville and met with you. Is that correct?
The head of the office
withdrew your right to practice before the Internal Revenue Service?
They were a witness in the hearing. That person was a witness in the hearing.
What hearing?
I'm sorry. She actually was in Knoxville at the hearing and was a witness at the hearing. The lady that's in charge of the Office of Professional Responsibility.
The hearing that was held by the Internal Revenue Service? What hearing are we talking about?
Well, this was a hearing up in Knoxville. The way the process works when you have this kind of hearing, there's an administrative law judge that does it. What the Internal Revenue Service has done is they have taken administrative law judges from other departments. These administrative law judges are not tax judges. The judge that we had is a judge with the Environmental Protection Agency, has no tax background, no tax knowledge or experience. You should know that that judge has convicted every person that has appeared before them. You should know this is the first time in history that the IRS disbarred anybody simply because they could not pay their taxes. There was never an issue of whether or not we had filed taxes or whether the returns were accurate. We just simply were unable to pay, and the IRS made a very big deal and did a big PR release that they had disbarred somebody simply because they could not pay, and it was the first time in history. You also need to know that several IRS agents perjured themselves. You also need to know I wrote an 8-page rebuttal. The judge's opinion is replete with errors of fact and errors of law. She's not a tax judge. She actually convicted me of something I was not even charged with.
Mr. G, thank you. Well,
Wasn't it upheld?
The IRS also violated an additional policy and procedure, and they refused to hear our appeal.
Mr. G, I thank you for coming in. And,
Gentlemen, I thank you, and lady, I thank you very much for allowing me to be here. Thanks again, and I appreciate the consideration, the opportunity. Thank you all.
Thank you. All right, and I guess we were gonna table this discussion of the Open Meetings Act so that the legal department could, I guess, develop more of a coherent for all boards. Evidently, I think some of the issues that have been brought up is that there have been instances where you wish we could have phone conversations or conversations out of this meeting, but due to the strict enforcement of the Open Meetings Act, that it somehow inhibits us from doing board work throughout the year. We meet 4 times a year, and it becomes very difficult and cumbersome to go between meetings without having to resolve some issue. And so we were looking for clarification from legal and whoever needs to be involved. I know Mr. Blofus has said he has read extensively the law, since he says he has the time to read it. And therefore, I think his comments were appropriate in the fact that, the penalty for having these things is the negating of whatever decision was made in that meeting. We very rarely would be deciding anything of that magnitude, but it sure would be nice to be able to have some conversations outside of this. And I know the department is very strict in the enforcement, or was when I went through my orientation about the significance of that rule and what that means. So we don't want to violate any policies or rules. I can think of one instance this year where Mark was wanting to do the NASBA board, and I don't have the ability to even reach out to the executive committee in that process for basically an issue dealing with staff issues here. Not so much board business, but just more of, more in the line of employment type issues. And so, anyways, as y'all are putting together whatever you can for the next meeting, those are really, I think, the issues that we're wanting to be addressed. So nobody's wanting to do anything behind anybody's back. It's just more of the nature of, how do you run a board, or how do you effectively manage this board with only meeting 4 times a year? So it gets very cumbersome. So,
Mr. Chairman, to your point, Appreciate that. And Mr. Bluffs and I had a conversation about it. So, and that was the sort of the beginning of reaching out and seeing what we could do.
Right.
As I'm sure the board knows, we do now have basically new supervisory council all the way up the board, almost to the commissioner level now. And so when I ran this request by for someone to appear at this meeting, I was about 3 weeks out from the meeting. The response that I got was that the department and division would be happy to send someone, but with essentially new legal management in place and some recent attendance at CLEs and other things regarding the Open Meetings Act. Because there are almost 24 regulatory programs within this division alone, the head legal folks thought that it would be appropriate to get together something a little more standardized that they could talk to every board about, and that will be one of their projects to get done before the end of the year. And then once that is done, they will decide on who is to present that.
And even setting agenda items for meetings, we can't even have that conversation. And that was your big point was, we're not deciding anything. We're just trying to figure out what we need to talk about at the next meeting, and we can't even do that. So,
and one last thing, we've done it before on key major issues that required board action in the interim. There's always the option of the conference call.
Right.
The notice period is not that long. Now, granted, in the NASBA situation that was discussed, as I understood it, even that expedited timeline might not have gotten it done in time.
I don't think it would have.
And I understand that, and that will be added to the mix of, considerations for the presentation. But I just did want the board, and especially Chair yourself, to be aware that that is something we've done before and could do again if it were not so time-strapped that, because we're talking a week, 2 weeks, from beginning of knowing that it needs to happen to the notice to actually having the call. So it's an option that's on the table. It's not perfect and doesn't fit all emergency situations,
right,
but it's better than nothing, and it's what we have for now.
Right. I appreciate that. All right, with that, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Done. Thank y'all.
Did it without a break.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. I wasn't even thinking. I was thinking I want to be done by lunch.
You too.
Yeah.